Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Spotlight Berlin AI Ecosystem session. I'm very happy to welcome you all here. I hope you all grabbed a coffee and you're all motivated for this next hour, since you will learn about what's going on in Berlin in the AI sector, both from startups, companies, and researchers. Just before we start, there's a few rules, as always in webinars, just to make sure the session rolls out nicely. All participants except the speakers and the chairs will be muted by default during the session. And if you would like to ask a question, don't hesitate to use the Rover Q&A platform. We will have room to answer those after the panel. If there are any problems, please contact Sinna. She's our facilitator today, so thank you, Sinna, as well for being here. And just to inform you all, the session will be recorded. I would also like to thank all our sponsors that made the EBDVF conference possible. Thank you all. And today at our panel, we will welcome 4 amazing speakers from Berlin. We have Dr. Ella Maria Cades here. She's founder and CEO of Nocturne. Yuri Stubbe, managing partner of Taiwan. Professor Thomas Wiegand, he's the executive director of Fraunhofer Heinrich Hertz Institute. And Dr. Rasmus Rote, the CTO and co-founder of Merantix. And I'm your host today, Charlotte. I'm innovation manager at Berlin Partner. I will introduce the AI activities that we do at Berlin Partner in Berlin quickly after this. Then Yuri Stubbe will give a short introduction on the local AI ecosystem. And this will be followed by a panel discussion with our amazing panelists. And there will be a short time in the end to answer all your questions, but keep in mind, it's just 1 hour. Berlin is a creative metropolis, a startup hub, a place for innovative technology and science. Berlin is also one of the most dynamic economic regions in Germany. We at Berlin Partner are offering companies, investors, and scientific institutions business and technology development. At the cluster ICT, media, and creative industries, we support the growth of the digital economy in Berlin. So, for example, especially in future-oriented fields such as energy, healthcare, and mobility industries. Berlin also has a growing AI landscape. We have major companies, startups, and research institutions advancing the development and application of cutting-edge technology over here. As AI innovation manager, I support this vibrant ecosystem by connecting stakeholders and also growing the network locally and internationally. I do this, for example, by organizing events, meetups such as the AI Monday, and tailored workshops for companies wanting to implement AI, for example. You can read all about the AI ecosystem at our AI Berlin website and follow us on our social channels. Over the past year, we were able to initiate many innovation projects in Berlin, and Berlin has thus turned into a leading AI hub within Germany, but also internationally. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy for new connections and can support you on your way to establishing your company or get connected in Berlin. I will now hand over to Yuri Stubbe, who will give you an introduction on AI activities in Berlin.
Thanks, Charlotte. I hope you can see my screen now. Yeah, thanks for inviting. Charlotte and I organize the AI Monday since quite a while, and so I'm really looking forward to the exchange here and the discussion. And yeah, before I share some of the insights that I have on the Berlin AI ecosystem, let me quickly just give you a brief introduction to myself. So as Charlotte said, my name is Yuri Stubbe. I'm the managing partner of Taiwan. Taiwan is a group of experienced technology, strategy, data, and circular economy experts. And we help companies with disruptive change. As you could see that in many areas, and AI is just one very simple example of a technology that has the potential to actually provide us with disruptive change, as we believe. And Well, we do that with helping to, help to explore technologies, changes, understand the vocabulary around machine learning specifically, help understand where to focus, which processes to automate, and so forth. Help in the strategy development, but also in the transformational process. And we also believe that fundamentally consulting need to be different. It need to be co-created. It need to be ecosystem driven. It need to be agile. And ecosystem driven is kind of the segue also to get into the actual topic of Berlin. Ecosystems, out of our perspective, have a tremendous, powerful impact, positive impact to companies. And once you understand that you do actually not to create all the products and services on your own, but by leveraging ecosystem partners, you can actually create much more services. You can draw in more customers. You can get more data, which is also important from an AI perspective, right? Because then you can create even more and better offerings and optimize processes. From our perspective, Berlin is the perfect place for creating ecosystem, especially in the AI space. There has been some research being done just a few years back shortly before we started the AI Monday event series here in Berlin. And that showed that there's an ever-growing number of companies, startups, research institutions pushing innovation, specifically in the AI space. The city has over 200 companies with 5,000 and more AI experts, and accounted turnover of €500 million, making it actually the place to be for AI in Germany. A total of 28% of German companies are in the AI field are actually based in Berlin or Berlin-Brandenburg, and the number is increasing, and 48% of all the German AI startups were actually founded in the German capital region. We have 50 to 65 professors in different fields of application that are carrying out research and education at different facilities, colleges, universities, you name it. And well, in order to overcome any potential fears around AI technology, concerns, but also to get inspiration and exchange, we need to enable people to talk about AI, right? And that was one of the reasons why we founded AI Monday. What is AI Monday? AI Monday is an event series that we've started in 2018 in Berlin. And it's become the voice and the meeting place for the Berlin AI community, but not just in Berlin, also in other cities. We had by the end of this year, we will have 20 events at always different changing locations with a very wide range of different partners and experts and AI enthusiasts, and we created quite a large community there. And that's just, speakers. All those speakers are usually coming from Berlin and from the regions here. The locations are companies that are selected because we always want to make sure that the location and the topic really much fits, right? So those numbers alone speak already quite a message. And if we draw a little bit closer into this topic, you can see that we had a very wide range of different focus topics at our events, right? Art, medicine, music creation. We had just recently, we focused on Monday, this Monday, we focused on energy and energy production. We had retail, and we've been at different conferences, at different startup and accelerator spaces. We had large corporates supporting us, but also science and education. And that's just all happening, and that's really just the focus on Berlin here. So you can see that how much is going on in the city in terms of AI. If you want to get in touch very briefly with all those companies that we've talked to, with the partner, with the people behind it that are driving the AI community here, we've created what we call a compendium at the beginning of this year. So you can download this on our page. And then finally, I think our partner, the DFKI lab in Berlin, we organize AI Monday together with, once summarized it quite well from my perspective. Berlin has a truly unique AI ecosystem. We have, as I said, we have from startups, research, politics, large corporations. We have everything here in the city, and that's really truly unique. I think there isn't any comparable city in Europe that has a similar setup. And so, with that really kind of short keynote on this topic, I'm really happy to be part of and you know be also in the city here, and so thanks so much for inviting, and I'm happy to get into more details as part of the discussions.
Great, thank you, Yuri, for sharing that. That was already very good insight into our local ecosystem, and I would now just like to invite the panelists on stage. Here you all are. We will have the opportunity to get to know each other and each one of you briefly. And we will start with Thomas. Thomas Wiegand is the Executive Director of Fraunhofer Heinrich Hertz Institute. He also holds a professorship at the Technical University of Berlin for image communication and has consulted companies and startups over the last years. Thomas, which main projects are you working on at the moment? Would you like to introduce? Maybe also unmute yourself so we can hear you. Maybe there's a little technical glitch at the moment. It worked fine when we prepared, so.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So let me maybe briefly show a few slides. Do you see them now?
Yes.
And let me try to make them full screen. So do you see them now, full screen?
Yes,
Thank you. So very briefly, the Fraunhofer Heinrich Hertz Institute has been as an institute in Berlin since 1928, and we started in the area of oscillation research, and now it's called AI and digital, but we've been at this for quite a while. What we are doing at the institute is we bridge the gap between academic research and practical applications, and we are looking at lots of fundamentals and quality assurance efficiency things in AI. And to summarize our activities, we are working internationally with a lot of partners. We try to publish our stuff as good as we can, and we are also participating in international standardization. And we are also part of those academic networks that are around in Europe, like the ALICE network, or we are also part of the Berlin Center for Machine Learning and Bifold, and all those activities that are happening in Berlin. And Berlin is actually unique in Germany and Europe for its activities here. So to bring it all on one point, so we have three pillars where we work on AI, which are research, and so we work on making AI machine learning better. That includes its compression, it includes its explainability, and it includes quality assurance and efficiency. Then we work on standardization, national and international. Tomorrow I will be on a panel and give a keynote about AI for health. I'm sharing a focus group at the World Health Organization in the ITU on benchmarking artificial intelligence for health, and we are also working on standards for AI formats, like how to transmit a neural network, how to transmit data to enable federated learning. And then we have a very big activity on applications, in particular in health, using AI in computer vision and using AI in communications and using AI in the sciences and also in areas like landscaping and also in production and other areas. So that's briefly our work at the Henry Hertz Institute. I have quite a few more slides, but I don't want to steal it away from our panel, and I hope these slides help us to have a good discussion.
Great, thank you, Thomas. Thank you for this insight into your work. I will just briefly hand over to the other panelists to introduce them as well, and then we can dive into our discussion. Maybe if you could stop sharing the screen, then we can see everyone on stage again.
I know, I try. I have a problem with my display here. I'll try.
Okay. No problem.
Can you unstop me?
Sorry?
Could you unstop me sharing my slides, or can you not?
Now, could you do that, please? Great. We're already going to continue now. So handing over to Ella. Ella Maria Cades is founder and CEO of Nocturne in Berlin. The company offers retina scans and throughout the structure can look into neurological conditions. Ella is also an active member of Women in AI and the winner of last year's Deep Berlin Award. So Ella, introduce yourself. Which topics are you working on at the moment?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Charlotte. Thank you for the introduction. So yes, we are actually providing a decision support tool for early diagnosis and monitoring for neurological conditions via analyzing imaging of the retina of the eye. And this is a very exciting field because actually the images are taken with the hardware technology that now in the last years kind of revolutionized the way eye diagnostic is done. So there are lots of images out there, even more in more, let's say, isolated practices. So currently we are actually looking, since we are in between neurology and eye diseases, now we are looking to collaborate also with ophthalmological offices, how we can actually use this data that is out there and was just taken and sits there in some local databases to be able to analyze them, but also to first filter them and look what data is actually possible to be further analyzed is a very important topic. And also to engage more physicians that are not only in these large hospitals and maybe much more willing to adopt digitalization all in all, and to engage them to move towards more innovative approaches in analyzing this, since it is actually has been proven how well you can use, especially in these use cases, early screening for different diseases. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks for being here today, Ella. And last but not least, introducing Rasmus Rothe. He's the co-founder and CTO of Berlin-based startup Merantix, which is the world's first venture studio for AI. He's also a renowned deep learning researcher and winner of this year's German AI Startup Award, sponsored by Berlin partner Axel Springer. Rasmus, introduce yourself. What are you working on at the moment? I know you're setting up an AI campus in Berlin.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte, for the invitation and the introduction and all the previous contributions. So, yeah, we are a venture studio. We are building AI companies. So we are partially an investor, but we don't invest in basically outside startups. We build them ourselves, and so we've been building a few. For example, Vara in the space of medical imaging, Zia Search in the space of data management. Just now started 2 new companies, one in the space of synthetic biology. So pretty broad, pretty technology agnostic also. So we do stuff in computer vision, but also natural language processing. And the core concept about Merantix is also that all our companies are co-located, because we believe there's a lot of value in kind of this exchange between the companies and learning from each other, helping each other. And we are now basically with the AI campus broadening that to the wider Berlin ecosystem. So the plan is to open an AI campus in Berlin in April, where we will have space for more than 400 people. And the goal is to really bring together not just our startups, but also other startups, but also corporates, SMEs, so anyone working on machine learning. And I think there's, I guess, like three benefits from this. So one is obviously the knowledge exchange between people. learning from each other, helping each other. Second one is also doing business with each other. I think there's a lot of companies that could serve other companies on the campus. And last but not least, I think it gives also some visibility to what's been happening in Berlin, because I mean, also with the previous presentations just now, like there's a lot of very interesting research startups and also corporate research that's working on interesting applications. But I guess Berlin has the problem, because of its history, that it's very scattered all over the city and very decentralized. And so kind of bringing efforts a bit more together, I think is great for all players in the ecosystem. So this is one of the big projects we're working on at the moment.
Great, thank you, Rasmus. Handing over to Thomas again. In your presentation, you said that one of your main application and research areas is healthcare. How does the current corona crisis influence your research? Which developments do you spot?
Well, we actually have been on our path quite a while, and it has some impact on our work, but all those other research projects are actually quite actively going on, and how to say, we are working on several aspects that are also affecting corona, but in a way, AI for health is a young topic, and it needs to be, we need to still lay the groundwork for it, in particular for its benchmarking and for its regulation and for quality assurance. So it looks like we'll need to battle corona mostly based on traditional research and traditional medicine methods.
Interesting. And you were talking about quality assurance in data sets. How do you advance research in that field?
Well, we actually we have developed technology for explaining deep neural networks. It's called layer relevance propagation. There we can actually identify why a certain classification was made in the input signal. We can create heat maps on the input signal. For instance, in a picture, we can indicate which pixels led to identifying the shock in the water. And based on that, you can actually inspect your data and do data quality. And then we do also statistical analysis over data clusters and bias, etc. These things are actually quite interesting and quite important in health. And in particular, also when it comes to regulating health software as a medical device that uses AI for health, because there you have this question, is the product developed over a data set, using a data set trained and tested that is representative and also generalizes to those patients that come in the future.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And maybe handing over to you, Ella, you said that quality control also plays a role in your startup. How do you ensure that, or what are the main stakes?
Yeah, I can actually very much echo what Thomas just said, because also we are a medical device, so we need to ensure a certain quality. But surprisingly, talking about quality, one of our main modules in our technology was to ensure that the data that we analyze has a certain quality. And let's say, as uninteresting as that sounds from a developer point of view, it's actually a huge step in ensuring that whatever you provide as parameters rely on data that has a certain quality. And that was actually not trivial at all, because in the real life clinic, people tend to use data. I mean, you get very messy data and you try to use as much data as you can because you already measure the patient. So, you know, you usually get data to be analyzed that it has all different shapes and forms, and actually the requirement from the customer is to ensure that you can use as much data as possible. And you can even train an AI to detect features there, but I mean, you can reach a point where probably what you detect is not even related to some anatomical feature, and to find this trade-off and that balance between using most of the data, getting the results that are reliable, and you can say that they are also related to some anatomical features is, yeah, it's a challenge for sure.
That definitely sounds like a big challenge. I feel that Rasmus has maybe some answers to that. You said that you are providing a common space for your startups. So does that also mean that you're sharing data sets across projects?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think for the campus, that would be super interesting, right? Like, if you would have companies also collaborating. So if they're either in the same space, or maybe one could be a customer of the other. So say, I don't know, there's maybe like an automotive company that has some data sets, and that can share that with the startup, and the startup could work with the data and ultimately become a supplier for that company. Or I don't know, you have several medical imaging companies collaborating on the issues which were just mentioned by Thomas and Ella. I mean, both kind of assembling the data sets in the right way, figuring out what you want to label, making sure that the algorithmic performance is stable across your different deployment sites, and also providing some explainability. Those are, like, you know, very, I think, challenges for every startup, and also, I guess, start to become a bigger challenge once you're like in the real world, where it's about, you know, certifying it, where it's about dealing with much larger data sets. When you have millions of images, you know, it's much, you can't look through them anymore manually. So you need to, you know, also build some software around that to help you with this. And I think these are all things which are kind of, you know, coming from research, but then the devil is in the detail on the applied side. And I wish, like, if we could kind of have a more open exchange there on the campus, I think that would be great, and that would boost ultimately all our efforts. Because anyways, like, even within like narrow domains, if you say medical imaging, even there, like, what Ella is doing is so different what Vara is doing. Like, we sell to very different customers, so we can only benefit from each other in exchanging this knowledge. And usually, and I think that's exactly where the AI campus can help and do something good for the ecosystem.
It's again the ecosystem approach and sharing data that's at the core, right? Maybe Yuri, handing over to you. Being very well connected in the Berlin ecosystem, which trends do you spot? Are there any emerging topics that are coming up in the AI field?
I mean, just connecting to the question that we just discussed, right? I mean, the topic of having enough qualitative data that you can actually use to train your neural models is certainly a challenge many companies face in this space. And what we've seen in our events specifically is that there is more and more startups looking into exactly that that area of, okay, how can we maybe federate data so that we can use the data from different companies that are kind of very similar, and then use them collaboratively. You know, getting back to this ecosystem approach, you don't always need to do everything yourself. You can actually, with leveraging others' data that you don't actually own yourself, you can actually do a lot. But then you need to open up. I think also a trend on this one is this whole topic around edge computing and how to you know, companies realize that there's the focus needs to be on data. And, you know, when specifically looking into the health area, a few years back, you get your X-ray still kind of printed on this very specific material. Now you get a CD-ROM into your hand if you leave the office, right? To actually take the CD to the next doctor that then does the actual operations, whatever, right? So this is still feels like the 90s, like CD-ROMs. I don't even have a device anymore that can read this type of technology, right? And so we need to. There's a lot of work still to be done in companies to digitize, which is kind of a strange word, but it's kind of looking at new ways to exchange data, to understand that the data is the core of a lot of those you know, it's the fuel for any AI-driven technology. And if you don't actually have this data available and are able to share it, then there's little advances that we can make. And that's something that we see, based on your question. You know, this is something that I see, that lots of more and more companies are actually trying to look into that, looking into data architectures, trying to understand what value do they actually have in terms of data. And that's the prerequisite to actually do anything in AI. That's what we always evangelize around when people are kind of coming and like, yeah, let's do something in an AI. So like, what data do you actually have, and is it available, and so forth. So that's about some of the trends specifically towards the discussion that we just had. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you, Yuri. Yeah, interesting also to see that we all need data, and that for many companies it's still just groundwork, right? Just to gather that and to label. Yeah, sometimes it feels like there's a gap between what we can do in terms of research and what companies are currently up to. Maybe Thomas, you can share a little bit from your network perspective as well. You said that you're also involved with the Bifold Center. Can you maybe share a little bit about that? Yeah, what exactly is the Bifold? How is it adding to the Berlin landscape?
So we had the Berlin Big Data Center as the first German Ministry of Research funded center, and then we have the Berlin Center for Machine Learning, and they are now being combined together and perpetuated as the Berlin Institute for Learning, yeah, roughly, and in that center, which is going to be quite large, we will create new professor positions. We will do core machine learning and core big data research, how to pipe large amounts of data through novel algorithms in machine learning. And there will be lots of core research, and we'll have new professor positions and PhDs working on that. And then we'll have the areas of digital humanities as one area. For instance, one fascinating example is that the Cathedral in Florence was built over a period of more than 100 years. And there are lots of documents, and doing the historical work requires digital technology and machine learning and big data. And then the other area is medicine, and there's a big collaboration with the various Max Planck institutes that work in this area on infectious diseases and on molecular medicine, and also the Charité and others in Berlin on the topic of medicine and AI. And so Bifold will take its innovation power and provide it and make basic research and provide it also to the applications. And there are startups spinning out of Bifold as we are talking. And for instance, in the area of AI, we just had one big startup that acquired a big amount of venture capital for diagnostics using AI in medicine.
That's very interesting. Also, this connection between startups and the research realm. Maybe also a question to both Ella and Rasmus. Whoever wants to answer first, like how do you connect with the research field, or how do you include research in your startup strategy? But Thomas, you also wanted to add.
Yeah, and one more thing I completely forgot to mention, but it's really important. Bifold will also have lots of teaching in it. At the universities, all Berlin universities are involved in Bifold, and there will be teaching, and that will produce lots of talent. Mm-hmm. And I think this is one of the biggest shortages that we have in this area, that we don't have enough young people that are qualified by their education to jump right in. They can learn on the job, but to jump right in and maybe found a company or join a company, that's also something Bifold will provide.
Great. Also another point of discussion, especially for the startups. Ella, Rasmus, any one of you want to take over?
You want to go first, or? Okay, I can go. Yeah, no, I mean, like, I think like building the bridges to research is super important. I think that again happens on like several levels. So I think you know, on a very local level within even Merantics, we have our paper discussion group once a week, where we discuss 1 or 2 papers. We have a tech talk every week. So I think that's like our internal way to kind of be connected to research. Then there's another one that we have always also some students doing a master thesis with us. So that's another way to collaborate. And then a third one is that we are also involved in some publicly funded research projects where we also collaborate with some other research institutes. And so that could be universities, it could be institutes like Fraunhofer. And so I think that's also for us a great way to collaborate because it institutionalizes that a bit more. And then I think quite a few people also are still within Merantics are also still quite connected to their PhD supervisors. So that's another connection. And then lastly, I mean, and that's I think also what will strengthen Berlin a lot, like with bifold. I mean, that's going to be a huge thing for Berlin, and will strengthen the research ecosystem in Berlin even more in the space of machine learning. And so I think there will be even stronger ties in the next couple of years between kind of the local universities and institutes and the startups and corporates. So I've been only in Berlin for a bit more than 4 years, but I felt like even over the last 4 years things have been moving closer together. So that's definitely going in the right direction.
Very promising. How do you view that, Ella?
So we are actually a spin-off from the Charité University, Berlin, from the neuroimmunological department. So we still collaborate with our research institute, but we also joined, like Charité has different research groups going, like researching on AI in different topics, like mostly imaging, but also diagnostics. So there are also other meetups like healthcare in AI that happens every month, I think, where we join. And then we also collaborate basically with different institutes, even before in our research with the HTW and Beuth Hochschule, but also I did my PhD at the Freie Universität Berlin. So we kept in touch with the community that is scattered a bit at the moment through Berlin, working in different maybe research projects, but also companies. So I think there is actually a huge community from which you can learn from, and challenging projects and challenging outcomes that you might have not expected, that actually push you to create even better products and solutions. And I think this exchange is super important. We even got, for example, a very nice idea on how to better deploy our products from somebody who's working in analyzing the cashier at the out when you exit the supermarket. So I think this is not just being inside the healthcare, but the AI community itself can give you so much input that across industries. So I think this is very important. Yeah.
Great, thank you for that. Maybe handing over to you, Yuri, again. If you're looking at the AI ecosystem, so we learned that there's a lot of research happening, also a lot of transfer between research and application. Is there anything that you feel is, or that you're still wishing for our local ecosystem? Anything that we should advance further? Or maybe also to the other speakers, I think it's, yeah.
I mean, what I've seen in the, we're kind of looking into this since 2018 or even 17 a little bit, is that there is quite some journey, so to say, and in terms of how people perceive the topic around machine learning specifically. And in the beginning, AI was a lot, there's a lot of fears, there's a lot of artificial intelligence, and so there's a lot of discussion that we had specifically on the events, but also when we talk to people around on perception, negative perception, maybe even, and so forth, right? And so I think that has changed a lot. There, people are much more educated, much more knowledgeable around this topic, and so you don't actually have less fears and less discussions around, or anxiety around this one. Still, if I look into some of the political discussions that we have around, we need to have standards, we need to do, provide more regulations and stuff like that. I was like, no, let's not focus on putting barriers already there and here, but let's continue to focus on the opportunities behind it. And I think there is still lots of things to be done. Even high-tech companies like Zalando, which is one of the clients of mine, that have a very strong technology background, are still having so much possibilities to leverage this technology and to do that, right? So if I would have a wish, it's like let's talk more about the possibilities, the opportunities out there, and what is needed to actually unlock those, and then talking about restrictions and regulations and data privacy and I mean, it's all important. I don't want to kind of say this is not important, but it's maybe from the time we spent and the time, the space it takes sometimes in some of the discussions, it should be reversed. And that requires talking. I think there's more events that like this one here, like AI Mondays, like the different conferences that we have that take those successful use cases that companies actually deployed and provide inspiration, so that and also talk about the challenges, like having enough data, sharing data, getting data into the right format so that we can access it all. That's the things that I would, if I would have a wish, that I would continue pushing, specifically from a political perspective.
Maybe also opening this question to the other panelists. Thank you, Yuri, for that insight. Any wishes from your side, or any development that are very much needed in the AI ecosystem?
If you think about the shortages, then it's basically people and data. There's apparently algorithms. You find people that work on algorithms. That seems to be the fun part of the story. The tough part is really educating people, and also having sufficient, large enough labeled data sets to get something out that works all the time. For medicine, for self-driving cars, for all those important areas where AI might be used and has a promise to be used, and I think that's where a lot of work is going to go in, and lots of people will be needed in these areas. And for instance, in the health space, if you make it so, we have one topic which is on histopathology and breast cancer diagnostics. This needs to work around the globe. So, and you have different expressions of these pathology images in this area. So that means you need to have labeled data sets, not only in Germany, you need to have them also in Africa, in Asia, etc. And you have to basically be able to access them, while the jurisdiction about those data is very different in those countries. Some countries don't allow their health data to leave their country, and that needs to be dealt with. And you also have to then pass the regulation, the medical device regulation, for instance, in that country. But this also applies to other AI topics, where it has to basically work all around the globe, but some specific data that are needed from some areas are actually not available. So how do you deal with that?
Definitely a challenge, yeah.
Maybe to double down on this, I think like it's generally also much harder to find strong people on the data engineering side, like especially when it's about like handling larger amounts of data sets, and kind of dealing with that. That's anyways like 80% of the job, and so also having this skill set, like people who have basically a good enough understanding of the machine learning side, but are very strong software engineers who also know about infrastructure. That's I think like the sweet one. That's what you need for production grade systems, and something that it's going to be important to if you want to get more into production. Now, from a data access perspective, I think like one difference, and if you also compare the European or the German or Berlin ecosystem to kind of maybe the US and China, like that, I would say from a technical perspective, like there are very strong people here. Capital is also here, like you know, a capital might not come from locally from here, but like you can raise capital here surely. But I think what's one thing which slows things down here is that especially corporates and SMEs are just much less experienced in working with startups, and are, you know, much more careful into especially engaging with very early startups. So once you start and you're like 2-3 people and you want to work with the kind of Fortune 500 company, it will take you much longer to convince them. And I think that's what we see also with some, I guess, US competitors, similar technology, you know, similar teams, similar amounts of funding raised, but like the way they get into these corporations much quicker because the corporation has worked with 20 startups before, and it's also kind of more risk taking and doing so. And I think if we can do something around this, like helping corporates and SME to be more open there, educate them more on how to also engage and why it's good to also take some risk at the beginning working with startups, I think that would help a lot of startups. That would also potentially help academic research and getting access to data sets. And I think that's something we should work up in Europe in general.
Great, that's already also answering one of our Q&A questions about how we're comparing with China and US. So thanks for that. Ella, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think once you get out of Berlin, there is still, or out of larger cities, there is still a big need for having a basic understanding of what AI actually is. I think that is still missing, and we see that actually in real life. Of course, data is a big issue in healthcare, and as Thomas mentioned, like even for us in our application, the images are very different in different population settings. So if you deploy it in a region, even in the US, where you have maybe more African-American people or Hispanic people, and we trained it on a Caucasian group, then you have to be sure, or you have to be aware that the data will not be the same, or you cannot rely so much on the data. So I think this is a big issue that we will, I wish it will be easier, but I think there are positive developments in that area in research, at least, to have this larger common data spaces. And I think also, if I wish, would be to have this space of more trial and errors, even in healthcare, even like the step before you get to medical device and all this regulation, so you can test more than, like right now, you still see very little, like a small number of research results that you read about actually put into practice. And I think there is a gap between those, but also like some intermediate step before you get into all this regulation to just test how this would work in real life in a better setting. Yeah.
Definitely, thank you, Ella. I'm just looking at the Q&A, and we already have a few questions coming in. So I think let's hop onto that already. There's one question for Thomas, very specific. Where could we find your PhD positions? Someone interested in your research field?
Oh, you find my email, just send me an email. They, to be more specific, so we do basic AI research. We combine AI and communications. We have a big area of combining AI and 5G and 6G. The whole area is very important to combine. We use AI for compression. We do compression for AI. We use AI in medicine, but also in other areas. I also forgot to mention for construction sites. It's also a big area where we are using AI, and we combine it with computer vision also in this area. And so lots of things. Our group is growing. We've been building it since 2010, long before the thing was popular.
Okay, I see.
That popular as now. It was popular then, but not as popular now.
So basically, there are many PhD positions and many touch points where people could get involved. Another question, also a very specific one. I'm just going to read it. It's quite long. From Dor. On the bottleneck of getting enough data and the restrictions on sharing data, have you considered or discussed blind federated learning, so that experimenting on the same data without making it downloadable to a partner? That would mean no need to duplicate and add storage, no fear of someone else having a copy of your data after the collaboration ends. Would anyone like to answer that?
Well, this is actually what we are expecting to happen, particularly in the health area. But something needs to be downloaded somewhere. So somebody may not be comfortable with uploading their algorithm to a site, to a different site, you know. And but at the end of the day, it's typically the people who have the data usually have to say where the data goes. And this is what's happening. And for instance, in the US, the FDA is using health data sets at different hospital sites for some of their validation work. It's already happening that way. And I think this is going to be happening also in Germany, coming out of the medicine informatics initiative, etc. So that we'll have distributed data repositories, and they will be labeled. You have to be aware that in many areas the ground truth is not known, by the way. For instance, in this pathology example I mentioned, we have 7 pathologists labeling the same image for tumor cells and lymphocytes. That means also that you know, the labeling needs to happen at different sites in a federated way, and for that you need to have specifications as well. So you need to basically specify how the annotation needs to happen by the experts and multiple experts, and what to do if multiple experts have a different opinion of what the ground truth is, etc., etc., etc. And in order to support this, we are actually at the focus group AI for Health. And if you find the focus group, if you type AI4H into a search engine, we built software. And the software is actually supposed to help with all of these things that I just mentioned. The acquisition, the annotation, what happens if multiple annotations are needed for the same data set in order to have a fuzzy ground truth, so to say. Training, what are the metrics? Testing, what are the metrics? Etc. And then randomized clinical trials, for example, using the AI in practice. And then looking at the whole problem, the way it is actually needs to be dealt with in practice, which is that once the AI is out, it sees way more data than it's in its original development. And once it's out, you need to be able to collect data again. And you have to obey all the restrictions that are important, like GDPR, etc. And then do a version 2.0 of your AI, which is hopefully much better. And then make an update, for instance, of your medical device or of your self-driving car.
Great, thank you for that answer. Coming to our next Q&A question that goes out to Rasmus from Jean-Christophe. Is it not also a problem of the balance between techies and marketing for a startup? Do we have the right balance? Are US startups more geared towards selling first? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think like US startups are often very commercially oriented, and I think that's good because, like, I mean, sure, you're doing research, but ultimately you're trying to build a company that has a product that people pay for. I mean, that's basically the basic of a company, right? So I think like focusing on that very early to show traction, to bring the product out there, but also to validate that
Interesting. So it's also a very different environment.
Maybe to add to this, maybe to add one comment on this one, right? When we did some research for a client of us on some outside in innovation and around AI, what we realized is that there's a lot of startups that are sort of in the consulting services space. So they are just good in what they do, but they don't have a product, they don't have a solution to sell. They are just kind of focusing on some, you know, specific part of the AI spectrum, and then they're providing some custom software solution services there, right? And that's super hard to sell. So either you are a good in a network, but if you go to a website that just says I'm good at AI, then this is super difficult to sell. And I think that's where marketing focused. I'm not sure if US is super strong in that so much, right? But at least marketing focused people that have a kind of an understanding of how clients think are better positioned, because you realize that you need to somehow package what you do in a better sense, create a service, create something that you can plug in and that it works, right? You can then still do consulting, you can still do the custom services stuff, but that's sort of often an entry point. And so that's what we realized, at least, that's the differentiator for a lot of, at least for the corporates to look for, because they don't want to spend time to develop something first. They look for something that they can use quite quickly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There's one last question from Mohammed asking, why are Berlin startups very health industry focused? It seems like a blue ocean there. Maybe also, Ella, you can talk about it. I mean, being a health startup in Berlin, how do you view it over here? Is it just health?
I mean, if I think at the numbers that you have in early this year, I think it's actually not health, but I think it was a different industry, more on consulting, that is high represented in the AI space, even in Berlin. But definitely I'm biased, because I have I connect mostly with startups in the AI sector. So and I think I was surprised when we started like 2 years ago that Berlin was kind of back then considered as a hub for healthcare. So there were different cities, like I think Dubai was for mobility and Berlin for healthcare. So I did not really know who defined this, and I still don't know the answer to this, how these specific focus areas were defined. Definitely you have here with Charité and Berlin Institute of Health and Max Delbrück and you name it, like a lot of research institutes that that give you access, or well, not really directly, but at least you have a strong ecosystem to create these products in the healthcare. Yeah, I think I think, but if you look at it globally, there are still a lot to be done. So I don't think Berlin is the hub for the health startup. So I think we still lack in numbers and in solutions that are needed. And I wish there would be more, to be honest. Is my position, yeah.
Great, thank you, Ella, for that outlook. Also, I think it's safe to say that Berlin has much to offer in healthcare mobility, but also, for example, in business process management, we have loads of applications over here. So we're already come to the end. Thank you so much to all my panelists. Thank you for all the attendees for attending. Thanks for this great session. Thank you to Thomas Wiegand, to Yuri Stauber, to Ella Maria Caddes and Rasmus Röthe for this amazing discussion. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks for the invitation.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Pleasure.